Next, from Chicago, we talked to Jeff Vose, the Regional Superintendent of Schools for Sangamon and Menard School Districts, about recommendations for improving school safety, the shortage of teachers in Illinois, and other areas of concern for school administrators. This runs about 30 minutes.
Jeff Vose, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Yes, good morning.
It's been a while since we had a chance to talk, and over the last year, at least we've had of all the financial problems going on with the state, at least now we have, at least for education, the funding in place. Just starting off there for a moment, is the funding, as far as you're concerned, no longer an issue, at least for the current school year?
That's correct. The school funding for regional school superintendents and our budgets are through June 30th of this year of 2017. There are GRF funds, general revenue funds, that could be in this discussion or battle of the budget at the General Assembly that could be of some concern with our grants, but for the majority, most of our operational funding is good through June 30th.
And there's a couple of key issues we want to get to, but let me ask you something just as a follow-up first to the election. When we had this amendment passed with the transportation funds not being able to be used for other purposes, does that present any concern for you going forward, that we lock out a portion of the funds that have been used to offset revenues in the past?
Right. Not that I'm aware of. I don't see that there is any negative effect that I am aware of at this time.
As we are here at the Illinois Association of School Boards annual conference, and I'm told it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, education conference in the United States.
Yes.
What are some of the key issues that you all are focusing on?
Well, there's a couple issues. I've got a presentation tomorrow in regards to school safety, and I just left a panel discussion on school safety drill acts and also preparedness in the school buildings. It was after the Newtown, Connecticut tragedy in 2013. At the time, Governor Pat Quinn, he had a school safety summit in the winter of 2014, and at that time he created a school safety and security task force for the state of Illinois, and I was appointed as one of the 18 members to that task force to work on creating minimum standards for security in schools. In that task force, I was also appointed the chair of that committee, so we did some really good work there. There were 18 members on that committee. The makeup of that committee included General Assembly legislators, senators, and representatives. It also had teachers, it had parents and school administrators, also fire and law enforcement individuals and safety experts. So we met almost monthly for a year, and we made recommendations in July of 2016 for that task force.
And to make the schools safer from what they had been, what were some of the key recommendations?
Well, some of the recommendations, I'll back up. There were 4 subcommittees we created. The physical plant or the school building to address those concerns. Then we had training, communication, which would be internal communication within the school district, and external with your first responders, police, fire, and such. Then prevention. We looked at mental health issues and intelligence and understanding those things. So we reviewed 7 other states: Massachusetts, New Jersey, Oklahoma, Oregon were some of the states. We reviewed all their safety plans and compared them to what we currently had in the state of Illinois, and actually we matched up really well or exceeded what other states were doing currently. So there were not a lot of recommendations, but the ones were, we wanted to provide technical assistance to the districts. We wanted to provide them with best practices, and there was an act that was created in 2005. It's called the School Safety Drill Act, that was created by the legislature here in Illinois, which establishes the minimum standards that school districts must be required to do for safety drill acts. So, for example, they have to do a law enforcement drill, a fire safety drill. They have to also do a severe weather drill. So they have to do 6 of these drills. it annually. And so what we recommended is what we heard from the individuals out in the field and from our task force was that some of those have to be some of those drills, they want the drill to make one of the drill random, so it's unexpected. So that's how you learn to see where your weaknesses are. So that was a recommendation we made to the General Assembly and the governor and the state Board of Education. So that was one. The other was to have this task force ongoing. And so that's what's happening today. There are 3 panel discussions here at this conference, and school safety is a focus of this conference, which I think is great. I just left a session upstairs, and there was standing room only in the session, and tomorrow I'm going to do a facilities school building session tomorrow with an expert in regards to that. So I think it's well received. These are important things as we have these tragedies and events that go around the world and in our nation, that we need preparedness and work on these things. So I think we did a lot of great work.
You know, I was going to say, you brought it out that it was after the shooting in Connecticut, but you also brought out, which is interesting too, while the initial thought in people's mind might have been terrorism or the random shooting kind of a thing, that just a tornado coming through,
right.
Especially in Illinois. I mean, it's a very likely scenario. It does happen. We just see the town of Washington that was so
right.
Hit by a tornado about 2 years ago. That do you look at the physical plants, and you touched on that? To what extent are you talking about making like a secured safe room where people can go? I mean, what are there specific solutions that are being proposed in these areas?
Yes, that's a possibility. There could be a safe room. Just the facade or the front of your building and the makeup of kind of the landscape that you may have outside of your school. Those are things to make sure that the shrubs are low, maybe 3 feet tall as opposed to larger than 8 feet. Maybe have tinted glass or some type of protective glass on the front. Those types of preventive things, and also a system of checking people in and out of your building, making sure that doors are not opened or left propped open. Those are just some basic things that people could do, and they need to work. What we found out was there's in smaller communities and larger, is that they're not working with their first responders as much as they should be. So getting acquainted with your police and fire protection and having them go through and do walkthroughs so they're familiar with the buildings. Those are some vital, important things, and they're required to do that annually. As regional school superintendents, we check their drills when they go through, and we ensure that they conduct those drills, and they also have a crisis plan that they have to revise and look at and update annually. And all of that information is on the State Board of Education, where they can go and look at the IllinoisStateBoard.net. There's a template for designing your crisis plan, and also there are sheets there also to help you with your safety drills.
Money is always an object. Is cost a concern of implementing some of these changes?
Very much so. That was one of the concerns we had, was funding. Where do you come up with the funding to make sure you're secure? And right now, the Illinois State Board of Education received a federal grant, and I want to think it's close to $1 million, where they can work with the federal government to help with professional development for training, but also there were funds at one time safety for grants that you could utilize for cameras and different safety features in the schools, and we're hoping that those funds will be restored. At this time, I don't believe they are available, but they were offered to schools where they could apply for those grants. So we want to look at technical assistance, best practice, and try to get funds to help with professional development. We also work with the Illinois Emergency Management Agency that also has received some of those fundings, where about 3 years ago we did a safety conference in Springfield at the University of Illinois, and it was well attended, and those grant dollars allowed people to come and show up, because money is tight for the districts and it's hard to let subs out or get subs for individuals to come, and that's the next topic.
Well, I was going to say, let me go that, because you and I had talked off camera, and one of the interesting things I thought interesting and surprising is that Illinois in some ways is having a growing teacher shortage of full-time teachers, and then also for substitute teachers.
Correct. I just read a report that says that currently we're about 70,000 teachers, a shortage nationally, and they think by 2020 there will be close to 300,000 teachers, a shortage of 300,000 teachers.
Now, on one hand, that's because we have baby boomers retiring.
Yes, attrition.
Why is there not? I would have thought a lot of younger people would have gone into the teaching profession, but there must be a shortage of people entering the pipeline.
Yes, there is, and currently it just seems that there's several different variables. I think why. One, as you know, we have a pension issue here in the state of Illinois, and a few years ago, teachers, they created the Tier 1 and Tier 2, where if you're a new teacher, they're expecting you to work till you're 67. And I know that has discouraged some people to get in to.
But isn't that the case though in the private sector as well? I mean, in fact, private sector people don't even have no pension. I mean,
right.
It would seem like the teachers they're still getting, those that would go into the teaching profession would still have a better
correct
economic package.
But as we get this image of a 67-year-old teacher on the floor with kindergartners that had started at 22 or 24, that's a long career. But that is just one thing that I hear from the field. The others, I just think that it's very challenging. The paperwork process and the application process and the test. I mean, obviously you want the test to be rigorous to become a teacher, but some of them have become very difficult. But what is it, how we're dealing with it?
Is there, I should ask, I mean, I sometimes hear anecdotally from talking to teachers, is one of the issues the extent to which we've had so many education reforms over the years that people are just, what's the term?
Not able to teach.
They feel they can't teach. They feel like whether it's the No Child Left Behind the
accountability
others,
measures.
They're teaching to the test rather than teaching what they think is important. That they're just having so many reforms year after year that they never get settled into one reform before some new administration, either at the federal level or at the state level, wants to mandate some other changes. And people are like, let us alone.
Right, you are correct there. That is what mandate relief is, something that we work on and all the associations, educational associations are trying to reduce, because it just detracts. There are good intentions for the mandates, but there's just an overwhelming amount of mandates. But we did do the regional school superintendents did a survey in the fall of 2015 because we saw this concern coming with teacher shortage. What we found out, we surveyed the 852 districts within the state of Illinois. 530 of those districts responded to our survey, and what we found out in that survey was roughly 60% of those districts found difficulty in filling teacher positions. And then roughly 20% of those districts canceled programs or classes because they couldn't find instructors for those programs. And the ones what we heard in the survey, the ones they were lacking or looking for were math teachers, special education teachers, science, and also foreign language. Those seemed to be the biggest ones, and they were usually at the secondary level. Also, what we saw was in rural areas, it seemed more difficult to get teachers to go to rural areas within the state, not as much in the suburbs that surround the collar counties of Chicago. So we're trying to figure out how to fix it. So what happened at the General Assembly is they passed 2 days ago on Wednesday in the veto session, the General Assembly with bipartisan support passed Senate Bill 2912. And 2912 is the educator licensure bill, which is going to and we also have a substitute teacher shortage. And so what that bill is going to do is going to reduce the fees to become a substitute teacher. It's usually...
And a substitute, obviously, if someone calls in sick, they need someone to teach the course. So the school district would typically have a handful of people, 10, 20 people that they can call on. And maybe they're retired teachers, maybe they're just retired whatever, and they call up and say, Bill or Sally, can you come in and fill in for the day?
And they're not finding as many Bills and Sallys these days, so that's where they're trying to get incentives to get, and also we heard from retired teachers that they felt the fees were too expensive for them to come back as retirees and to substitute teach. So
what were the fees and what will the fees be?
They're roughly about $130. That you do a background check, and you also
Is that annually, or is that a one-time?
just a one time. And then so what they're reducing that down to $50, and that became part of that bill, Senate Bill 2912. Also, what is really positive about this bill is we have a huge challenge of getting out-of-state applicants for administrators or teachers to come to our state. And before, I'd always receive calls from individuals that said, hey, I would love to come and work in Illinois, but you are requiring me, my credentials, I have to take 3 classes to be a math teacher in Illinois, and I have to take this test. And I have an offer in Missouri, or I have an offer in Indiana, but I really like the job offer I've received in Illinois. However, they're not requiring me to take classes and a test to come to their state and work. So we were losing a lot of applicants to surrounding states. So what this Senate Bill 2912 has done is created a reciprocity. So if you have a comparable out-of-state license, you can now come to the state and not be required to do those additional items to get here. So that will hopefully encourage people to come to our state. So that's the really important piece of that bill. Also, we need this bill is allowing us to streamline the process. A lot of people have said the application process is cumbersome. So
to become a teacher?
Yeah, in Illinois. So
how long does it typically take that they're complaining about?
Well, you used to come in and get a provisional, and then they would give you time to take these courses and tests, but that costs, a couple semesters of college. There's money involved that would discourage someone from coming. So it could take a couple years for them to complete those requirements, but they could teach on a provisional. But now, hopefully, that will streamline with this allowing the comparable out-of-state license.
When someone, in case they haven't thought about it, it seems it would seem like it wouldn't be a bad thing to do as a substitute teacher, especially perhaps for a retiree and obviously somebody who's flexible with their time. What does it pay? And I know it's going to vary probably per district, but what would be an approximate compensation?
As regional school superintendent for Sangamon and Menard County, it varies from probably $75 to $100 a day. I know Springfield School District, which is our largest urban school district in Sangamon County, is approximately $100 a day. And then some of the smaller surrounding schools may be in the down to the 75 or 80 range. And it's the thing is we just want to get as many quality candidates as we can. The other piece that we're working on with all the stakeholders, I would applaud Dr. Tony Smith and his employees at the State Board of Education have created a stakeholders group. That's the Illinois Federation of Teachers, Illinois Education Association, Principal Association, Illinois School Administrators, and the regional school superintendents and other stakeholders to come together to try to figure out what to do and to recruit and make sure we have teachers in the pipeline and make sure that we have quality candidates to fill these positions of shortage, because this is a national issue and somehow we got to get out in front on it. So also there was a grant that was received by the governor's office. The National Governors Association awarded the governor's office a grant, which I'm going to work with them and other stakeholders to try to determine what we can do and work with higher education with as I mentioned, there's a shortage in math, science, special ed. So if the State Board of Education and regional offices and higher ed can work together with the K-12 school districts to determine what their shortages are going to be for the next 3 to 5 years, hopefully we can kind of recruit for those specific areas. I see we have to go into the high schools just like an Army recruiter is the way I see it, and we need to start recruiting our students here and keep our students in the state and make them quality educators to teach our future kids.
I'm still just personally surprised, given the teachers are really, when you compare them to other incomes, are not underpaid relative to the average, the mean salary of the United States. I mean, they're
Right.
up there. Plus, they do have a pension, which virtually no one has anymore.
Right.
And then they have the time off during the course of the school year. It's that aspect of it is, I think, compelling as far as a pay package.
And
The issue of whether or not you get along with your boss at the school district is a problem that one would face in any line of occupation, or if the children, if you're in a district where there's especially bad discipline in the classroom, would be challenging, certainly.
Yes.
But then you could still move around to a different district if that were the case.
yes.
Do teachers typically sign a contract or have a contract when they?
Yes, and then you get tenure after so many years, and
And that tenure is not transferable, is it? Is that
No.
tenure with a district? Or?
correct, correct. What is really shocking was what I heard at the beginning of the year as far as unfilled positions in school districts. For example, in Peoria, they started the school year with approximately 60 positions unfilled. And I know over near in the Danville area, there was.
Do you know what percentage that is of the total? I mean, is it?
I do not, but they're down. They had to rearrange, and they got those numbers down lower now. But that's concerning. And then I know in northwest part of the state there was maybe a dozen. To the west of Springfield there were several unfilled positions, and to the east towards the Danville area there were a dozen different positions that were unfulfilled, which that's a concern. We've got to wrap our head around that and do a good job. So I think the stakeholders, as I'd mentioned, we're getting together, and what's a really good start is that we got bipartisan support on the Senate Bill 2912 to help with reciprocity, to lower fees, and there's still lots more work to be done. And we're hopefully looking at some other legislation in the spring to see whatever we can do to streamline the process, make it more flexible for people to get into the field of education. And this, as you know, Terry, you're at the Capitol on a daily basis when they're in session. This budget's got to get fixed so we can keep our kids here, because some of the parent groups at some of the districts, I have monthly superintendents meetings. They come to these meetings, and some of the parents are encouraging their sons and daughters to go out of state to school and to start their career somewhere else. That is unacceptable to me, that I want to sit here and hopefully have our kids that are wanting to go into education and come back to our state and teach and make our state productive again.
Yeah. I mean, while the governor and the legislature have funded the K through 12 education, on the other hand, they haven't funded the other areas of government, and part of that would be, the colleges, some of the MAP grants on an ongoing basis, where
That makes things challenging.
So the kids may not be able to feel that they, can afford to go to college in Illinois, or are just concerned whether it's I don't want to, we've had different schools, I won't name them, say that they don't know that they even can continue an operation, which would be
correct. And that's distressful for the candidates and for the universities.
Or if they're going to go, they might say in that regard, I'm going to go to Iowa or Missouri or Indiana, where they're going to keep their schools open.
Correct. And now that we have the reciprocity, that will give more flexibility for those out-of-state folks.
What about the, again, relative to the election? We just had the Donald Trump, obviously he's going to be, it's still hard to get your head around that. You think of him as the apprentice. But he's going to be the president, and one of the things that he has discussed is having, closing down the U.S. Department of Education, which we didn't have until around 1979 or 1980 in the Carter administration. And say we're going to send that money to the states to cut some. You talked about the level of mandates and the strings attached to funds. What are your thoughts on that? Would that be a good thing to bring the money and let the State Board of Education, if for every state, maybe make a decision?
What I hear from stakeholder groups, as I mentioned before, and superintendents and administrators, principals and teachers in the field is what school boards want is to have that local control so they can make the decisions. Obviously, they need financial support from the federal government or state to run programs. That's part of the responsibility of our state is to help with that, educate. But they would, I think, prefer the local control. We just left the No Child Left Behind. We now have the Every Student Succeeds Act, which the Illinois State Board they're bringing out today their plan, which is comes from the guidance from the federal government. Every Student Succeed Act. They have their state plan that will need federal approval from the Department of Education. So they're rolling that out today. There's an Illinois State Board of Education meeting today at the Thompson Center to roll out their draft plan. They need to get approval. I think it's in late winter, or I think February, March. They will, I think, present that to the federal government. So in that plan, I believe will show how we would like to roll out that Every Student Succeeds Act, and also show the local control, and let the if the districts are doing well, let them determine what's best for them locally. If they're not and they need help, let's work with those districts and assist them in if they need assistance financially or academically.
Have you had much contact with the governor's office, and to what extent are you happy with the direction that, at least on K-12 education, that they're going?
Yes, I think the governor's office has been very supportive of K-12 education, and also looking at mental health issues. That's another thing that I've seen in these monthly meetings with our superintendents. There's these societal issues that we've been dealing with now, this mental health, and that kind of goes along with the school safety. So they're bringing out some of these their social emotional goals that the state board is looking at, and they will be wrapped into that Every Student Succeeds Act plan. So that's something I think the governor's been very supportive of, and that we can get behind as educators and help our districts, because basically we're the intermediary between the State Board of Education, the ROEs are, and with their districts. So I think he's been supportive of that, and his staff, and we continue to work with them. That and teacher recruitment, and also getting this plan rolled out. I think having state agencies work together with, that's something he's been pushing, having the state agencies work with education K-12, mental health aspects, and kind of looking at the whole child, I think is important stuff. And if we can get those things implemented, I think we'll be in a better place coming in the next year or so.
One thing, and I'm going to go to a different topic. If someone is interested in looking at a career in teaching, is there some source, a website, or someplace where they can get some information or maybe call?
Yes, you could go to the Illinois State Board. So I'd go to isbe.net, and there will be a drop-down menu on licensing to be a teacher. Also, you could go to iarss.org. That is part of one of our main roles, is to help people in our communities and our counties. There's 38 regional offices and across the state of Illinois, and part of our job is to help individuals navigate through that application process. So they could go to iarss.org, and they can find their regional school superintendent on there, and would be able to assist them through the process.
I suppose, too, they could also call up whether the Illinois Education Association, the Illinois Federation of Teachers, and just kind of say, hey, I'm thinking. It's always a good idea to talk to people in the field you're thinking of going into, and kind of saying, tell me your experience.
Yes.
One of the things, before we close out, the governor is working on, and it's kind of shocking when you hear, he's updating the technology of the state of Illinois, the computer systems. The oldest system was from 1974.
Right.
And there's been all kinds of issues, I know, in some of the social welfare programs, where one computer system can't talk to another computer system, and it created all kinds of problems. And I'm just curious, has that been a problem in education in any way?
Yes. They're just outside of Springfield, where, in Sangamon County, where I'm the regional school superintendent. On the fringes of the county, we have difficulties with getting quality access to the internet. And as these tests, these standardized tests that are now taken online, when you are testing in a district all day for the the standardized SAT or other standardized tests, it will take up a lot of the bandwidth. So they are working also, the governor's office and the Illinois State Board of Education have really stepped up on the technology piece. They brought in groups to assist with that. So also I hope that we could see some progress there, because that is a huge challenge for districts. Also, the Regional Office of Education, we are the fiscal agents. They're called Learning Technology Hubs. Throughout the state, there's 6 within the state, and they also help assist the districts with their technology. For example, we host monthly tech coordinator meetings with our school districts. I have 13 school districts, and we work together with those individuals and try to find out what their concerns or needs are, and work with those learning technology centers, which in turn work with the Illinois State Board of Education to make sure those needs are met. But there is concern, and I think we're heading in the right direction also with that.
So it's good for people to know that while we are having this tug of war going on with the budget, at least there are fortunately some other areas of progress being made. Right?
Yes, there is, but it would be nice to get this budget impasse moving forward, and then we can just get down to doing our jobs and doing the good work for our citizens of the state.
Jeff Vose, we'll leave it there on a happy note.
All right.
But we appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, pleasure.